And welcome into the first ever HammerStats PGA betting show. We are live with Andy Lack from Pick the Pup. How you doing, Andy, man? How's it going?
I'm good, man. Sorry, I'm just tweeting it out. Okay, I got it out. But I'm good, man. How are you?
Man, I'm rocking. I just got back last night from the World Barbecue Championship in Memphis, Tennessee, where we had a big time on the river. Heard our name called a lot, went up on stage a lot, and got some sunburn, had some fun, ate too much. Other than that, it's all good. How about you?
Great. I mean, I'm super excited for this week. I was feeling a little under the weather yesterday just because I got the second vaccine, so I had like a pretty bad 24 hours there for a little bit. But now I'm feeling a lot better. I'm good to go. I'm ready to get into it.
Man, this is awesome. PGA week doesn't get any better. I mean, obviously, it's a major. We just had the Masters. We're going to really get into it. For those that aren't aware, Andy Lack has his own site. You want to talk about where they can find your work, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a website called pickthepup.com, and I also have a podcast called the Pick the Pup Golf Show. I do 2 episodes every week, sometimes a little bit more, depending on the week. I'll do like some bonus episodes for majors, but generally I do a solo pod every Sunday night where I just kind of do a first look and total breakdown of the course, deep dive of all the stats, what I'm putting in my model, what I would recommend, the stuff that you would want to look at, my early leans, all that stuff. And then every Tuesday I have a guest on my podcast and we kind of share our picks and break down the full betting board. We go through the tiers like the 25 and below, 25 to 50, and kind of share all of our best bets. So yeah, absolutely. Please subscribe to the Pick the Pup podcast. It's available on Apple and Spotify and all major podcast platforms. And then on pickthepup.com as well, I do kind of a super nerdy, longer, full breakdown of my reasoning and analysis of all the players that I'm betting this week. And so I write that one article and I do my 2 podcasts, and that's all. That's that. The article comes out on Wednesdays and the podcasts are Sunday night and Tuesday. So yeah, definitely check it out.
Yep, that's awesome. And if you're watching this on YouTube, we will have links to Pick the Pup and other links to Andy's work in the description down below. And while you're there, please feel free to subscribe to our page, like it, send a comment out there. Let us know how things are going. We are going to continue our contest this week for the PGA Championship. If you are watching on YouTube, comment in the comment section, obviously, right now, and let us know who your pick is to win this week. And if that player wins and you're the first person to pick that player, you are going to win an autographed photograph of that player. And so we would love to get those comments in there. Pick them up. You may want to maybe want to wait till after you hear Andy talk first before you put your plays in, because I know that he's got some really, really strong opinions on a couple of players, and I can't wait for us to get into it. But before we even get into the picks, which you're going to give 4 or 5 solid recommendations?
Sure. I mean, I can give you as many. I have strong opinions on many players. I can give you as many as you want. I have a outright card of 6 players that I'm betting to win the tournament, but I also have a bunch of top 40 plays. And I mean, I can give my recommendation on matchups and pretty much anything that you want to go through. I'll tend to have an opinion on.
Well, we're going to do that. First thing we're going to do, we're going to talk about the course. And this is a very difficult course. It's a beast of a course. Why don't you break it down a little bit for us?
Sure. So it is Kiawah Island, the ocean course. It was designed in 1991 by Pete Dye. As you mentioned, it is a par 72. It is 7,876 yards long. This will play as the longest major championship course in history. Now, I will say, be a little bit careful with kind of all these players cannot compete on this course because they're too short. I will say that the guy who runs the PGA, Kerry Haig, he tends to be very fair in his setups, and they have a ton of different tee boxes to work with. So I would be shocked if all 4 days it's actually playing 7,876 yards. I think they're probably going to play around with some of the tee boxes, and it may not play as long as it can maximum all 4 days. I wouldn't be shocked if some of the shorter par fours, they maybe push the tee boxes up 1 or 2 of the days to make those drivable. So it's going to be a beast. Don't get me wrong. It's an absolutely brutal course. And especially if the wind gets blowing, it's going to be really difficult. But I'm not necessarily convinced that we're going to see an over par winner.
Really?
Yeah, just based on, I mean, if you look at PGA setups in the past, they're slightly easier just in general than US Open setups. But again, it all comes down to the win. Like, I have a friend on site right now who has played the course a million times. He has a house on Kiawah. We were junior golf buddies, and I was texting with him today and kind of just asking what he was observing. And he said, if the wind gets going, it's going to be brutal. Now, right now, looking at the weather, and again, this will get a little bit more accurate as we get closer to the day. It's not supposed to be crazy windy. I'm seeing like 10 to 15 mile per hour gusts, maybe can get up to 20 on Sunday, but I think it's all going to come down to the wind, in my opinion. I'm seeing a comment 8 to 10. If Detroit Dave is saying 8 to 10 under par, I absolutely agree with that. That sounds about right.
By the way, Detroit Dave, that's pro on our show on Tuesday nights and Thursday nights.
Oh, great. Yeah,
that's
I think
Drew.
we follow each other on Twitter.
Yeah. He's he's a lot of fun on the show. He'll be on the show tomorrow night as well. And you know what? I agree with 8 to 10 as well. But to your point, if the wind is blowing that hard, it wouldn't surprise me to see 6 to 8 more in the range as well. But
yeah.
It's going to be fun to watch. A lot of good players out there. What are some other characteristics of the course that you're looking at before you put your key stats in?
So, as I mentioned, you're going to have to get off to a pretty good start here, because the first 3 holes it's 2 short par 4s and a short-ish par 5 sandwiched in between them. And then it just gets absolutely brutal from there. The front 9 usually plays downwind and the back 9 usually plays into the wind. So I don't know how they're doing the tee times. Maybe they're starting on split tees, but maybe from a live betting perspective, just keep in mind that the back 9 is going to play a lot more difficult than the front 9, in my opinion. So maybe if you have a guy that's starting on the back 9 and they get through the back with a decent score, they're going to have more birdie opportunities on the front 9. But there are a lot of long par 4s. Par 4 scoring over 450 yards is definitely something I'm looking at in my model. 7 of the par 4s measure over 450 yards, and 2 of them are actually longer than 500 yards. 3 of the par 4s measure over 200 yards, and the other one is 197, so they're basically all over 200. And then 2 of the par 5s are almost 600 yards, and they play into the prevailing wind. Now, in 2012, they got a lot of rain and it played extremely long, but keep in mind that was in August. It's usually a drier month now, but a more windy month as well. So I'm expecting the course to play a little bit more firm and fast than it did in 2012. If you remember watching that Rory year, they got a ton of rain and Rory was just able to absolutely dominate that course because of his carry distance and his apex distance. Balls weren't really rolling, which is also kind of par for the course with past palm fairways and past palm greens. Past palm is still quite sticky, so I don't think that this course is going to play as a true links course, despite it having like the body of a links course. Past palm is just too sticky of a surface. You're not going to be able to see guys run up their shots and hit kind of these low approach shots that will run up onto the green like you see in the British Open. Past palm is just too sticky for that. So I'd keep that in mind, but I think the main things that stick out to me is just the length, the sheer length of a lot of these longer par 4s and par 3s. So 2 of the things that I'm definitely looking at is long iron play, proximity from 200 yards plus, and guys that score well on long par 4s and long par 3s.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and we've seen a lot of those key stats come into play in the last few weeks with some of these longer courses, and so it's going to be kind of closer to the same, and so but it is a different surface, and that's going to be fun to watch, and it does neutralize some of those guys, and so it's going to be a lot of fun. So speaking of actually, Drew will be a wild card with no rakes, everything playing as a waste area. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's absolutely true. There are no official actually bunkers on this course. It's just these large waste areas where you can ground your club. Um, it's pretty hard to determine how players will do in those areas. There's not a lot of data that we can use about guys who are good hitting long iron shots out of waste bunkers like that, where the sand is a little bit firmer. So it's really going to be interesting to see.
Right, right. So, well, cool. All right, so let's go ahead and start. Let's just jump into to your total key stats and you know how you broke down your model. Then we'll get right into the players.
Certainly. So, like I mentioned, I've got par four scoring in there on longer par fours, so 450-yard plus par fours. I think that's going to be really important. I think that strokes gained par fives is going to be really important as well. Just looking at, and again, I think I would be relatively careful with some of the 2012 stuff because I do think that this course is going to play a lot different than it did in 2012. Keep in mind, not only was the course completely renovated, it plays a lot longer, but as I mentioned, you're just getting different winds. You're not getting as much range. So I would be careful with the 2012 comparisons in general, but I will say this about 2012 is the top 10 finishers all played the par fives really well. So they scored on those par fives. They gained way more strokes on the par fives than they did on the par fours and the par threes. So I'm looking at guys that play par fives well. If you want to look at long par fives, well, I believe they have that filter in Fantasy National where you can look at par fives over 600 yards. You can look at par fives between 550 and 600 yards. I'm fine with just looking at par fives in general. And then really, man, it's going to come down to the proximity distances for me. I think that proximity from 200 yards plus is going to be huge with all of those long par fours. You're going to have long iron clubs into almost all of the par threes, depending on the wind. And if you're going for it in two, you're going to have long iron clubs into those holes as well. Proximity from 175 to 200, I think that's valuable to look at as well. I don't think all of the approach shots are going to come from 200 yards plus with how long these guys hit it. If guys are hitting the ball 310, 320 yards, and it's a 500-yard par four, it's still 175, 180 in for them. So I'm looking at that proximity distance as well. And then I'm not a big driving distance guy at all. I think it's kind of a stupid stat. I think it's a little bit misleading of the actual longest players on tour. But I think it's interesting to look at in terms of just separating tiers because there are certain players if you're 180th in driving distance or 156 because there's only 156 players in the field, your pathway to victory is going to be a lot harder, right? Like a Kevin Kisner, they're going to have to do a lot more right than somebody like a Victor Hovland. So I think that's valuable to look at. I have it as a very tiny weight in my model. And then strokes gained, difficult conditions. I'm looking at players who gain on difficult courses, strokes gained in the wind. Obviously, that's a big one. I'm looking at guys that play well in the wind. I'm looking a little bit at Pete Dye courses. I think it's valuable to look at Pete Dye courses in general, but this is 1,000 yards longer than Harbor Town. It's 800 yards longer than TPC Sawgrass.
Yeah, it's a die course, but it doesn't feel like a die course.
Sure. I mean, the only good comp for it is Whistling Straits, right? And even Whistling Straits, I believe they can get up to 78 or something like that. But, be careful with the Harbor Town stuff and the TPC Sawgrass stuff too, because although Dye does tend to do a lot of the same things, I mean, it's still it's impossible to compare a course where the majority of the par fours are under 425 yards to a course like this where they're all close to 500.
Yeah. Man, that makes a lot of sense. I can't wait for this one.
I'm excited too. I think the PGA in general is an underrated tournament. I've heard takes before that people think it's their favorite major. I wouldn't go that far, but I think it's an awesome tournament, especially if they get the app. I don't know if you remember this, but the app was a little touch and go last year at Harding Park. It wasn't up to the master standards. So hopefully if they get the app down good with kind of good real-time updates, then I'm super excited. That's another note to keep in mind. If you guys are following this on like PGAtour.com, I would download the PGA Championship actual app and use your leaderboard from the PGA Championship website, because that's going to be way more accurate and you're going to get faster updates.
Very good tip. That's a pro tip right there. I'll be downloading that tonight. Speaking of PGA Championship and Whistling Straits, I was there when it was there, when DJ, as a matter of fact, I was only like 20 feet away on that incoming shot that he landed in a bunker where he ground his club. And I don't know if you recall that, but that was just insanity.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
that was that rule.
And everybody in the crowd was just screaming. They were just blown away that they actually took a stroke against him on that hole, and so that was crazy. But anyway, that's a fun course to watch as well. I can't wait for the next tournament out there too. All right, so you want to get into the plays?
I think they have a Ryder Cup coming up there pretty soon.
They do. They do.
September.
Yeah, it's. Have you played that one? I know you're a big time golfer.
I'm a huge golfer. I've never gotten out to Whistling Straits. I'm dying to do it.
Yeah, it's just watching these guys play on that course, especially on the waterside shots. It's insane.
Yeah, I'm dying to play it.
It does remind me of those European courses. But anyway, you ready to do this?
Absolutely. Where do you want to start? I mean, I can give you an opinion on everyone.
I want to start with the guys that you've already bet and why. Let's talk about those guys.
So I bet Xander Schauffele at 22-1 is the lowest odds player that I have bet. I think Xander's going to win this tournament. I feel about as strongly as you can about a golfer that's 22-1. I'll give you a couple numbers. So him and Bryson are literally the only two players in this field that rank top 50 in all 12 metrics that I am weighing this week. So last 36 rounds, he's top 50 in absolutely everything I'm looking at. Strokes gained off the tee, strokes gained approach, around the green, putting, par 4 scoring on long par 4s, par 3 scoring on long par 3s, par 5s. He's actually first in this field in strokes gained par 5s, 10th in greens in regulation gained. Sneaky long too. Xander's actually picked up a lot of distance over the last year or so. And by the way, all of those numbers that I'm using, I don't have official strokes gained data for the Masters that he finished third in. So he'd be even better in my model if I had the Masters numbers, and he was still number one in my model. But the reason that I gravitated to Xander is I think that there's a lot of speculation about how this course is going to play. We really don't know how much the wind is going to blow. I mean, we can guess, but like we said, I think it's all going to come down to the wind, right? And Xander has all of his bases covered, right? Like there isn't a scenario in which I don't think that Xander can win this tournament. I think, like, for example, if this tournament gets super windy and the winning score is closer to even par, and that plays into the hands of somebody like a Matthew Fitzpatrick or some of the other Euros, I still think Xander can win that tournament. Now, if the course plays a lot easier than we expected and the winning score is closer to 12 or 15 under, which we've seen before at PGA Championship, sometimes they like to set it up for more birdies. I think Xander can win that tournament too. He has zero weaknesses in his game. He gains consistently in all 4 strokes gained categories. And, that's the reason that my models always love him, because it rewards consistency and well-rounded players. And I've said this for a while now. I think that Xander is the most well-rounded golfer in the world. That doesn't mean he's the best golfer in the world or that he has a higher ceiling than Bryson necessarily. It just means pound for pound, any day of the week, I feel most comfortable that Xander is going to put himself in the mix. Him and Rahm, I guess you could put in that category. I don't think that you're going to be able to just bludgeon this course to death. I don't think that it's going to necessarily be a putting contest. I think that you're going to have everything firing. You need to be good in the wind. You're going to need to be long. You're going to need to have a good short game. You need to play long par 4s well. You need to score on the par 5s. You need to be good in difficult conditions. Play the long par 3s well. You need to putt well. You need to hit your long irons well. It's Xander. Xander's the best at all of those things. He's the most well-rounded player in the field by far. And to me, he feels the safest to me. Look, you can't control what happens on Sundays. And I know he hasn't won a lot recently, but I feel more confident that Xander will put himself in the mix come Sunday than, a lot of the other players at his price point.
So you just said something that struck a nerve there. Recently, he hasn't really shown that well recently. How much of recent form do you factor into your model?
So I look at everything. I tend to use all of my numbers from last 36 rounds because I just think that's a good baseline. It covers like an 8 tournament stretch, like a 1 or 2 month stretch. I like to look at a smaller and more recent sample sizes too, to see if somebody's trending in the right direction, and a larger sample size. Like sometimes, like if you're just looking at I'll give you an example, like Tyrrell Hatton. He's really another guy that I bet, who I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. Tyrrell Hatton has a really good short game, but he had 1 week where he had an absolutely disastrous week around the greens and he lost like 7 strokes short game. So if you're looking at, it was at the concession where he just like chipped the ball into the water a couple times. So if you're looking at Tyrrell Hatton's numbers, you're going to see that he's like 130th in short game. But if you expand the sample size out a little bit more and actually look at where he lost and gained strokes, he actually has a really good short game. He just had 1 absolutely disastrous week. So I like to use last 36 rounds just because I think it's like a good baseline and gives you what they've been doing over the past month, 2 months. But I think it's also really valuable to see if guys are trending like in the right direction, right? You want them to be going upwards, right? So if you're looking at last 50 rounds, you want their rankings over their last 36 rounds or even their last 24 rounds. Hopefully they're trending in the right direction and not going backwards.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've always been a fan of the 24 round. I put a little bit more, probably more than I should, emphasis on recent form. It just seems to be working for me a little bit. Sam Burns is a good example. He's streaky, but I'm right there in that 24 round range. But I tend to favor to Guru Nick. In his model, it's always more consistent and much better than mine. But I like to throw my own model in there just for fun, and to see how it does compared to all you data scientist style gurus out there. So anyway, I just thought that would be a good exercise to kind of see how you base that.
Absolutely.
All right, so you're very, very convinced on Xander Schauffele. Let me ask you this before we get to the next player. When was the last time you were this convinced and this high on a player in recent weeks? When was the last time you were this high on a guy? Because you seem really, really high on thinking that he's going to win this tournament.
No, I tend to do this every week. Like basically the way that I do my research is I do everything in a week in advance. So I have all of my plays locked and loaded, ready to go before any of the odds come out. And I will just fire on those numbers basically as soon as I see them, unless there happens to be a huge discrepancy or I think that I can get a better number as the week goes on. And I've had Xander earmarked for this tournament for quite some time. Sometimes, like, I'll give you an example. Last week, I was very high on Will Zalatoris to win the Byron Nelson, which was just a totally dopey tournament in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah. But it's interesting because I thought Zalatoris was not necessarily going to be a sneaky play by any means, but I thought that he was going to be a little bit less popular than he was, coming off burning everybody at the Wells Fargo with the missed cut. A lot of people were on him at the Wells Fargo and he missed the cut and burned a lot of people. And I planted my flag firmly on Zalatoris on my Sunday morning pod. I always tell everybody who I'm going to bet on Sunday morning. And I proceeded to watch every single person that I know on Twitter also bet Zalatoris. And I was like, there's no chance that this ends well. It never does. Never, which is kind of happening right now with Victor Hovland. It's never, it's never the most obvious player. It's never that easy. I think Xander is going to be far more popular and by the way, I don't base, and I purely go with my numbers. I don't base like who I'm on or off based on, what other people are, if they're on him or off of him too, although I do believe in things like Twitter curses. But I do think that Xander is going to be, I do think that people have hesitation betting Xander Schauffele because he has not won an event since 2019. I think it's been a full 2 years now. The events that he's won 4 times, and he's done it in pretty good fields, but they've also been no cut events. So there is that concern with him that I think people are off him. I think he'll be super popular in DFS, but there is that concern with him that, he hasn't been winning recently, which is totally fair. The way that I look at it is I think that win equity, the idea of win equity, is kind of an overrated statistic. I'm basically looking at the person that I believe is going to have the best opportunity to put themselves in the mix on Sunday. What happens on Sunday is completely out of my control. Who makes the putts on Sunday? That is very, very difficult to predict and involves a lot of luck. I'm basically every week just trying to find golfers that I, based on my numbers, have the best chance to put themselves in position based on their skill set and how they match up with the course's skill set. And I just think Xander fits here perfectly. And I would be shocked if he's not in the mix come Sunday.
I love it. I love it. And I love the analysis, the full breakdown on Pick the Pup. And so I encourage you guys after this show to listen to that because he goes into much more detail. One final thing before we get to the next player. Do you often bet on any of the majors, considerably, like a month or 2 months in advance when the numbers are typically a little more inflated?
Sometimes, the numbers that I use to make my predictions, they are very recent form really matters to me. So it's tough for me to feel comfortable firing on a guy like a month or 2 ahead of time when there's so much golf left to be played. In fact, I pride myself on beating closing line value. I usually get the best numbers, but I'll give you an example. I bet Sergio at 80-1 after he shot an opening round 65 at the Byron Nelson. I was looking at the odds checker grids. There was an 80 on FanDuel. Everywhere else had him at 66. And as soon as he shot that 65, it was kind of midway through his round where he had made 5-6 birdies in a row. I thought those numbers were going to drop. Now, Sergio proceeded to shoot a 75 the next day and miss the cut. And I have a Sergio 80-1 ticket where now you can find him at some books as high as 110-1. So you have to be careful. It can backfire sometimes. So I tend to wait, but I'll say this, people that do that, there is a skill involved with it. And, there are some really attractive, you mentioned that you have a 70-1 Cam Smith ticket.
No. I have 100-1 Cam Smith.
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely incredible. I've seen a lot of guys with a 45-1, a 50-1 Victor Hovland ticket. I've seen people with 100 plus on Corey Connors and Spieth too, larger numbers on Spieth as well. So, I think it's a really smart strategy. It's not something I tend to do a lot, but man, it really gives you some leeway and it can set up your card nicely if you have some of those bigger numbers.
Yeah, I took 3 guys because their number just didn't look right based on how they were playing at the time. And Cam Smith was one. He was at March 28th. I took it. He was really playing well, and he was 100-1. The next week, he was 40. And so
was that what tournament did he put? Was that after the Zurich or something?
I think it was, as a matter of fact. Yeah. And then Siwoo Kim at 125. And then Ryan Palmer at 200. I didn't put a ton of bucks on these things, but when you get guys that are playing well that do have what I feel pretty strong upside, I mean, those kind of numbers I'm just happy with, and they're all considerably different now. But those are 3 that I just found attractive, and it worked for me when Spieth won his tournament. I took him in advance a while back, and so I don't do a lot of it. To your point, because I'm just not that great at it. But sometimes I I jump in there. Maybe it's because it's the only thing I can look at. It is majors because they're the only ones that are usually posted.
Yeah, and the other thing that you have to be careful about is books tend to they tend to take advantage of the degenerates, right? So like you'll see odds actually for the most part on most players actually got better today. Right? So like if you were firing PGA Championship bets on Saturday or Sunday over the weekend, a lot of the time, unless it was somebody like Daniel Berger, the numbers have actually gotten better today, and they may even get better during the week. So the only thing you have to be careful about is they tend to put out soft numbers because they know they can entice the true degenerates to bet them early.
Guilty, man. I guess I'm one of those guys. No, I just look for the ones that I like, and all the guys that watch our show, they know I like the guys I like, and I like to, I like to bet the guys I like. And when I see a big number that I think that they might, perform well, I'll take a little action on it, and so it's kind of fun. But anyway, well, let's go to the next guy. Who's next man up after Xander? Of course, it doesn't matter at this point based on your conversation about Xander.
So I have a 41-1 ticket on Daniel Berger, and that was somebody that I did get a much better number at. I'm seeing him at 30 at most places. I bet the 41 a little bit earlier in the week. I just very similar to Xander. I think this is a great setup for him. I know that Berger's not incredibly long, but he still plays long courses well. He gains ball striking on long courses. He's even better in difficult scoring conditions. He's gained 1.5 strokes on the field in difficult scoring conditions. That's 15th in this entire field. So he does really well on tougher setups. He's even better in the wind. He's gaining almost 2 strokes on the field in windy conditions. That's 7th in this entire field. Great on Pete Dye too. So I just think that Berger sets up really well for this course. And he's one of those guys similar to Xander where the theme of the week for me is, I think you'd be making a mistake if you were just playing bombers or just playing short game specialists. I think that you really want to look at guys that have well-rounded games. And that's why I gravitated to guys like Xander and Berger. Xander and Berger are both live to gain in any category, any day of the week. They're like Berger's short game has been a little bit off recently, but his long-term form with the short game is still really strong. Berger can get really hot with the putter. He can get really hot off the tee too. He has a pretty good driver sometimes when he gets it going. And right now, he's been absolutely on fire with his irons. Like Berger's hitting the balls from a strokes gain approach standpoint, some of the best iron play that he's had his entire career. And I certainly want a piece of that. Like just this year, 3.3 strokes gain approach at the Tournament of Champions, 4.6 at Pebble Beach, which he won, 3.5 at the Players, 5.5 at the Heritage. Like those are big numbers. Those are like really big numbers. So I went with Berger at 41-1. If you're trying to get in on him now at 30-1, I would still endorse it. I think it depends like how you're building your card. For me, like I wouldn't have somebody at, I wouldn't bet one of the favorites and then also have a Berger. I tend to be more conservative where I like to have like one guy under 20-1, and then I kind of live in that 25-100 range. But I mean, I still endorse Berger at 30-1 at the numbers. Now, I think he has a fantastic chance to win this tournament.
Yeah, I like that too. As a matter of fact, I got him at 33. I wasn't able to capitalize on that 40 number. I wish I was, but 33 is a good number for me. I'll take that.
Oh, for sure. 33 is a fine number. And I think maybe you could see a 35 out there or so. But again, I think it really depends how you like constructing your card. I see some people like I have friends that the way that they view this tournament is they'll just tell me, who do you think are the 2 best chances of players to win? And they'll just be happy betting Justin Thomas and Jon Rahm and calling it a day. And not doing anything else in the entire tournament. If you want to, that's not for me, but if you want to do it that way, it's, there are a lot of ways that you can do it. Speaking
of Justin Thomas, is he flying under the radar?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard to say that the number 2 ranked player in the world is flying under the radar, but of the people that I talk to on Twitter and the people that I follow, I haven't seen I haven't seen anyone really betting him. I thought about it. It was difficult for me because I had that Xander at 22 and I had, I could have done it at 17. I saw a 17 out there, which I thought was kind of a fat number for Justin Thomas. And I didn't end up going with it. I think maybe I'll try and use him in one and done or something. But of the elites, like if you're telling me to pick between John Rahm, Jordan Spieth, Bryson, and Justin Thomas, I'd actually pick Justin Thomas this week, and I'm not sure that's a super popular opinion. The reason that I feel that way is Justin Thomas is the best ball striker in the world, and if the rationale with past palm greens is that they're a little bit slower, they're a little bit easier to putt on, they're a little bit less granular, they tend to neutralize putting, right? So they're bigger greens with less slope and they're a little bit slower. So it doesn't take as much skill necessarily to putt well on them. If putting is neutralized, then Justin Thomas should be the favorite to win this tournament. I mean, he's the best ball striker in the world, and no one seems to be talking about him. So I couldn't fit him, but I'm not sleeping on him either. He's my favorite. If you're telling me what's one guy at the top of the first 4, I guess it is, of the Bryson, Spieth, Rahm, I guess we'll throw DJ in there. And even if you want to throw Hovland in there, he's 18 at some places. I actually think Justin Thomas is the best chance to win of those guys.
Nice. All right, cool. Well, let's go to your next play. So you've already hammered on Xander. You've hammered on Berger. Give us a couple more, then I'm going to start throwing some names at you, and you tell me where they belong.
Okay, I'll go a little bit quicker on these guys just to get you everyone. So I bet Tyrrell Hatton at 50-1. Again, that's a number that I've seen spike up to like 70 in some places. It's gotten back down to 50. That 70 number was just absolutely incorrect. And now I'm seeing it in the 40s, but I bet Tyrrell Hatton at 50. I'm completely comfortable with that number. Again, look, I think there's going to be a little bit of a narrative surrounding Euros. If you look at the 2012 leaderboard of the PGA, like after Rory, it was guys like David Lynn, guys like Justin Rose, guys like Ian Poulter. And to me, like, I don't understand what it is about Tyrrell Hatton. Like, people just seem to hate him. I think everyone seems to love Matt Wallace this week, and Fitzpatrick is getting a little bit of love too. But like, I watch a lot of golf. Tyrrell Hatton's the best player. He's won 3 times in the past 14 months. Like, I know he hasn't been popping as much as he usually does, but if you actually dig into the numbers, he's basically having one bad round and then grinding his ass off to make the cut and still finishing in the top 25. Tyrrell Hatton's so good. He's one of those guys like John Rahm, where if he finishes T18, he's like killing himself. That's how highly he thinks of his game. So he's the 9th ranked player in the world. I saw him at 50-1. I just think that the price is off, and he has a way better chance to win this tournament than somebody like Matthew Fitzpatrick or the way that Justin Rose is playing right now, or even Matt Wallace, who's playing well. Tyrrell Hatton's just a better player than those guys. I have a million numbers on him too, but we'll keep us moving.
Yeah. I like I said, I really appreciate you putting your pod out early like you do, because Drew and Guru and some of those guys will tell you that I've faded Hatton quite a few times this year. Now, when I say fade, that means you have to fade somebody in a certain price range, and so, but after listening to your pod, I was able to get him. I was able to get him at 60, and
great number.
Those guys are going to be shocked when I come on the show tomorrow night and I'm not fading a bunch of Euros. And so I think the Euros can do really well on this style course.
Well, I have the next guy I bet is another British guy. I bet Paul Casey at 70-1. And this was a late ad for me. I was thinking about Hovland. And it's just a no for me on Hovland this week.
Really?
Yeah, it's just not that easy. It's not that easy. It's never that guy that everyone points to. And just golf doesn't work that way. He checks every box for me. I'm happy to miss out on him. I love Victor Hovland. There's not look if Victor Hovland wins, there's going to be 100. Every single person that I've seen has a Victor Hovland ticket. Yeah, I mean, look, Vegas exists for a reason. It's not that easy. It just doesn't work that way. So I pivoted off of Victor Hovland. Paul Casey, man, you know, everyone. It's so weird how we do this. You know, people were lining up to bet him at 35-1 to win the Masters, like literally sprinting to bet him, myself included. I bet him at the Masters at 35-1. And now he's sitting here at 70-1 at some places. What changed? Like, what changed? I don't get it. He missed the cut on the number at the Heritage and then finished 21st at the Valspar, where he had one of the best ball striking weeks of his season. He gained 9 strokes ball striking at the Valspar, and now I can get him at 70-1, and no one has any interest in him on a course that I actually think suits his game better than Augusta. So, I mean, again, I have a ton of great numbers on Casey. He's great on long courses. He's great in the wind. He's great in difficult conditions. He's great on Pete Dye courses. He's 11th overall in my model. He's 3rd in my mixed condition model. And I saw him sitting there at 70-1, and he was somebody I looked right past when I did my initial research. And I just kind of thought about it again for a second. I was like, what's going on here? Because there's been no conversation about Paul Casey, but I think that's a great number on him.
Yeah. By the way, Paul Casey, when I did my little model here, he's number 1 in that proximity in this field. That's with a 15% weight. Number 1 in this field in 200 plus proximity, and he's number 7 in 175 to 200, and he's number 8 in greens in regulation. You tie all that together with a 14th in strokes gained in par 5s. He's number 3 in my model. So that was, and I promise you, we didn't talk about this at all. And so I find that really, really encouraging that you're there too. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, people. I don't know what it is. I think maybe he burned some guys at the Masters, but I've heard no conversation about Paul Casey. It's really like Wallace has kind of become the chalky Euro that everyone's going to. And I really like Wallace, by the way. I just didn't have room for him. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the time it's really about trying to find some of these guys that are a little bit under the radar, and the numbers, like you said, like the numbers that you have on Paul Casey, the numbers that I have on Paul Casey, he's just not a 70-1 golfer in this field.
Right. I agree. And so, yeah, that's a great call. You have one more, right?
I do. I also bet Joaquin Niemann at the same number, pretty much. I got him at 66-1. I feel like if there's one player that, I've kind of learned my lesson a little bit with some of these younger players. Like Will Zalatoris was actually number 1 in my Masters model, and I didn't even think about it. Like I looked right past him. Like I didn't even consider him. He wasn't on my short list despite being number 1 in my model because I didn't have course history in there. It was just based on skill set. And I was like, the kid needs more reps. But, I'm really having to change my perspective on some of these younger guys. Like watching Matthew Wolff contend at majors right off the bat, watching Scotty Scheffler, watching Will Zalatoris, watching Colin Morikawa win. I just think that the learning curve is a lot smaller. I don't think these kids are scared of anything. I think that a lot of these guys, they have just as good of a chance. And you can make the same argument for Zalatoris as well, who missed my card, but I do very much like. You can make an argument that they have just as good of a chance breaking through at one of these majors than maybe they do at some other tour events. Think about it. You get a course this week that everybody is unfamiliar with, right? Outside of the few guys that played this in 2012, everybody's coming here for the first time. So the playing field is completely leveled. It's basically just based on talent, right? That's a different situation than Will Zalatoris going to Memorial and trying to win at Memorial, a course that Rory McIlroy has been playing for 15 years,
right,
or Adam Scott has been playing for 15 years. That playing field isn't level. those guys have been playing this course for 15 years. They know all the nuances of it. But at a major, the playing field is completely level, and talent is actually most important. It's more likely to shine through because you can't use the course history knock on these young guys that you'd be able to use at like Memorial or the Heritage or whatever you may be. So I've had to reconsider how I look at some of these younger players in majors.
That's been happening for years, though. A lot of people don't realize this, but way back when in the '90s, John Daly was an alternate, and he drove like 20 hours to get to the PGA Championship, and he won the thing. And so never played on the course. I mean, things like that happen all the time, and so that's a really interesting point that you bring up. I like that. All right, so you mentioned a name just a minute ago, and I'm going to go ahead and jump into this. Rory McIlroy. What are your thoughts on Rory?
Yeah, I didn't even really mention him, and when I was talking about Justin Thomas, I like skipped right over him when I was talking about the top of the board with Bryson. It's so hard for me to ever seriously consider somebody at 10-1.
No, yeah.
I tend to just look right past him. I like Rory. Obviously, he's playing much better coming in. His confidence is back. The win at Quail Hollow, it was certainly impressive to me, but I'm not necessarily sure if it was the open the floodgates moment that a lot of people may thought that it was. I had him marked down at Quail Hollow for a while. I think that was the perfect place for him to compete. It's just really hard for me to find a way to back Rory. Even I'm not even sure that I would play him in a matchup against some of these other guys, just because I think that the number is so inflated at this current moment based on the recent win that not only am I not going to look at an 11-1 golfer ever, but I don't know. Like if Rory, do you play matchups at all?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like if Rory McIlroy is like a -130 favorite over Jordan Spieth or Jon Rahm,
I'm not touching that.
It's hard for me to get behind. And I love Rory. Rory's one of my favorite golfers. I was so happy to see him win, and I think that he is going to win a lot more in the upcoming months. I just don't see it this week. I think this golf course is going to be a lot different than what we saw in 2012.
All right. Our PGA teaching pro, Drew, he is the largest, and I thought I was a big Spieth fan. He is a huge Jordan Spieth fan. What's your take on Jordan Spieth this week?
I like him. I like Justin Thomas more at that number, but Spieth is another one of those guys. I think there's a very clear roadmap for Spieth to win, right? He is actually really good on long courses. So I don't think the fact that he's not as long as your Dustin Johnsons or your Jon Rahms or even your Justin Thomas, I'm not sure if that necessarily holds a ton of weight, because if you look at Jordan Spieth's performance on long courses and long holes, he's pretty good, right? He's not as good as the other guys, but he's pretty good. He gains on long courses, ball striking for the most part. He's really good in difficult conditions. And there's a school of thought that short game is going to be one of the most important things this week. And it's just going to be an absolute scrambling contest. I may very well be underrating short game, and that may play even more so in the hands of somebody like Cam Smith.
Right.
I think there's a universe where it gets so windy that even if you're a guy like Victor Hovland, you're still missing greens and everybody has to get up and down. I think that's the tournament that Jordan Spieth wins. The issue is I'm just not convinced it's going to be that windy. And I think that this course is going to be a little bit more benign than people think it is. Again, we already talked about kind of like that 8 to 10 sweet spot. Jordan Spieth is an incredible putter. Again, I think that past Paulum, it neutralizes some of Jordan Spieth's strengths a lot. But put it this way: if we wake up on Thursday morning and it's gusting, and you see like the first guys off are like all over par and stuff like that, the first guy I'll be looking to live bet will be like Jordan Spieth and like Cam Smith and Matthew Fitzpatrick.
I like it. I like it, especially that Cam Smith comment.
Yeah.
Okay, so now there is a guy.
By the way, can I say one thing about Cam Smith?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't fit him on my betting card. He was like my toughest cut, but I'm in the conversation with a lot of other smart guys that I trust on Twitter. We DM about all of our picks all the time. And one of my most trusted friends that I really trust his information. He is all over Cam Smith. And I think you might be onto something. Again, I just couldn't fit him in my card, but I think Smith is a pretty sharp play this week. And if you even look at the odds, Cam Smith is 40-1. And you can make an argument that he's not the type of player that necessarily deserves to be 40-1. But I think the fact that he is 40-1 in this field is basically the books telling you, we don't want you guys to bet him. Like, we don't want your Cam Smith money. Like, we're going to put Cam Smith at 40-1. Like, we don't want your Cam Smith money. He's the same odds basically as Patrick Reed. Most guys are going to bet Patrick Reed over Cam Smith.
All he does is hit greens, and he's second in par 3 and par 5 scoring, which is where and so, yeah, I love that. And like I said, when I saw him at 100-1, even though it was in March, I had to jump on it, man. And so
that's a great ticket to have.
Yep. And so I'm happy with that one. All right, there's another guy I want to talk about real quick. He actually leads the entire tour right now in scrambling and bogey avoidance. And he's also 5th in adjusted scoring in the all-around. And that's Webb Simpson. What are your thoughts on Webb this week?
I'm not ruling Webb out. I was talking with I went on Feinberg's show like late last week, and he was asking me like, are there any players that you're just going to cross off because of distance? You know, like a Webb Simpson is like, he's your classic. He's probably him and Patrick Reed, and even Webb's a little bit shorter than Patrick Reed. But Webb Simpson is the first guy of the elite golfers or the semi-elite golfers that you kind of look at and you say, oh, this course, this length, this could be a problem for Webb.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not betting him, but I'm not in the camp that he can't win this tournament. I think there's a roadmap for him to win this tournament. Again, I think that roadmap is maybe a little bit harder than Victor Hovland's roadmap or Xander Schauffele's roadmap or, you know, a lot of these guys, or even a guy like Tony Finau at similar odds because Webb is for Webb to win this tournament, he's probably going to have to gain over 5 strokes putting, which he does all the time. But he was somebody that, you know, he's not a fade for me. I'm not looking to target him in matchups by any means, but not somebody I'm looking to bet either.
Okay. He's one of our guys. You pretty much count on him. Another guy I want to talk about, and he doesn't seem to be getting any play. And even though, I mean, you know, he's amazing in you know, with his irons, and he's amazing, you know, tee to green, and that's Colin Morikawa. What are your thoughts on Colin Morikawa this week?
Yeah, he sure doesn't, huh? I mean, he the narrative thing picks up pretty strong. Like, I can guarantee you there's 2 players that just based on narrative alone, people are going to have a second thought on, and that's Hideki and Morikawa. And I think the logic is kind of just law of averages, right? Like lightning never strikes twice. Like, is a 24-year-old kid going, like, is a 24-year-old kid going to win back-to-back PGA championships at 24 years old? Like, it's not even something Tiger Woods did. Same with Hideki. Like, is this guy really going to win the Masters, go to Japan for a month, and then come back and win the PGA? Like, that's not going to happen. Course fit, if we're just completely taking narrative out of it, I think that this is a course that Morikawa might struggle at a little bit because his short game and putting isn't great. Like, the difference between Morikawa and Justin Thomas is that Justin Thomas has an excellent short game. They're both kind of bad putters or volatile putters, but Morikawa, he still doesn't have a great short game. His irons are obviously elite, but he still doesn't have a great short game. And I'm just pretty big on short game this week. And I'm worried about him making enough putts and being able to get up and down the stretch enough to win this tournament. But again, like, I'm not targeting him, like I'm not looking to like play against him in matchups. I don't underestimate Morikawa by any means, but I'm just kind of neutral on him.
Gotcha. Couple more before we get you out of here. Keegan Bradley, he really popped off pretty good in my model, and his recency form is pretty darn good as well, and he's sitting there at 80. What are your thoughts on Keegan?
I think Keegan's going to be very popular. Put it this way: if Keegan is not in the top 15 of your model, then you're probably running your model incorrectly.
That's true.
No, seriously. And I think that he is going to be a very chalky play in DFS. I've seen a couple nice tickets on him. I've seen a couple nice, like 200-1 tickets on him.
Nice.
For me with Keegan, I think I'm probably going to end up playing him in the top 40 market. I think he's a guy that is going to play well this week because of the course fit. Obviously, he's been hitting the ball so well lately, but you look at what he's done since winning the PGA Championship in 2011. He's just been downright bad in majors. He's played 15 majors in the past 5 years, 0 top 15 finishes. His best finish in a major in the last 5 years is an 18th at the 2016 British Open. And he's actually missed the cut in 4 straight majors. So I wonder if he's one of those guys where, he's just a one major guy and he kind of got his major. I think seeing him contend at the Valspar is a little bit different than contending at the PGA Championship. That's another thing. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that guys like Chris Kirk and Charlie Hoffman and Cameron Tringale are also pretty high in your model.
Yeah, they are. They are. As a matter of fact, Kirk is right there in the top 15. So is Charlie Hoffman and guys like Answer and Grillo as well.
Yeah, I like all those guys, and I'm definitely playing Hoffman, and I think I'm going to end up playing Kirk. But the thing that you have to be just a little bit careful with is there's a learning curve, right? Like those statistics from those guys like Charlie Hoffman and Cameron Tringale that have just been tearing up like the middle tier of the PGA Tour. Keep in mind, those guys aren't playing in the Masters because they're not good enough, right? Like they're not playing in WGCs because they're not good enough, So their numbers, they're not in the match play. They're not going to concession. So all of those numbers that have them super high in the model, those are numbers from the Heritage and the Valero Texas Open. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind with those guys. But circling back to Keegan, I think Keegan's going to play well this week. I like him in DFS based on the ownership. I think he'll be kind of chalky in that. I think I'm going to play him in the top 40 market. The course fit is so good. I'm probably a little bit cooler on him as an outright winner.
Okay. One more inside the top 100, and then I'm going to tell you who we have as our first 100 player that's in my top 10. But first, number 5 in my model is Corey Connors. I think his game really sets up well for this course. What are your thoughts on Corey Connors?
Yeah, Connors is interesting. He's another one of those guys that has been he has just been living at the top of my models. Like I could not escape him at the top of my models. The ball striking has just been so consistent with Connors recently. The problem that I have with Connors is, let me pull it up. I worry that Connors might be kind of on the end of the nice little run that he's had. Like you look at his results and he's kind of starting to trend downward a little bit. He, like I said, if I'm looking at kind of a rolling report of my model, he's getting slightly worse, his numbers. So I worry that you may be catching him on a little bit of a downturn. But I will say this about Connors, he's awesome on long courses. There's actually only 3 players in this field that are averaging over 74, that are averaging over 1.5 strokes gain per round ball striking on long courses. And it's Rory, Corey Connors, and Sergio.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's also he's great in the wind too, which kind of surprised me too. There's 5 players in this field that are averaging over 2 strokes gain per round in moderate or windy conditions. It's Rahm, DJ, Connors, Griot, Morikawa, and Corey Connors. So setup wise, I can't argue with Corey Connors' fit here. He's a great driver of the golf ball, not as long, but very accurate.
Just needs that flat stick working,
which he's been better with. What are you looking to play an outright on him, or like a top 40 or a top 20 or top 10?
I like him for a top 20.
I like that. I fully endorse that.
Yeah, I like it for a top 20, and
he's not going to win, but
and there's one other guy that's popping off that just doesn't. I just can't explain. Jason Kokrak.
That's a good play.
101. He's number 2 in this field under my weighting for strokes gained in par 5s, and number 12 in the field in par 3 avoidance, and he's right there in top 10 and off the tee, and so he pops in there right inside the top 10 there at 100-1. I know it's obscure, but give me your thoughts on him before we cut you out.
Not obscure. I think Kokrak's a great play. I couldn't get there myself, but he was one of those guys that I was seriously considering in the top 40 market. Kokrak has a great game. I mean, he's a great driver of the golf ball. Just looking now, he's 35th in my model. So that's probably a little bit better than I think he's probably closer to like the 50th ranked player down on the odds board. So I do think you're getting a little bit of value. Yeah, I love Kokrak in like the top 20 market. I think that he does have the game to play well. He's good on long par 4s, hits a lot of greens in regulation. He's pretty long. Bogey avoidance, he's top 20 in that too. So I think you're on the right track with Kokrak there.
Cool. Okay. Before we cut you out, you got any final thoughts or any final plays that you like, or any sneaky top 20 play, top 10s?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Griot. I'm really high on Griot this week. I just think his propensity to play well on coastal courses, it's a real thing. It's not just a narrative. I have a bunch of numbers to back it up, but he plays so well on these coastal courses. He's so great in the wind. I'm all over Griot in terms of like props. I tend to play the top 40 market. I'm a little bit more conservative. That works really well for me. But if you want to get a little bit more frisky and play Griot in the top 20 market, I think he can contend. And then the other, sorry, I went to a Knicks game the other night. So my voice and I do a lot of podcasts. So my voice gets a little hoarse from the end, and I've been screaming at my Knicks because they finally made the playoffs for the first time in 8 years.
That's awesome.
So my voice gets a little hoarse at the end. I apologize. The other guy I'll say is Cameron Davis, who I just can't seem to quit.
You love that guy.
I do love that guy. You can get him at, I think you can get him at 3-1 just to finish in the top 40 and like 6-1 just to finish in the top 20. I mean, I have one number on Dave. Okay. So Cam Davis and Bryson are the only 2 players in this field that rank inside the top 10 in proximity from 200 yards plus and in the top 10 in driving distance. So only 2 players in this field that are top 10 long irons and driving distance. It's Bryson and it's Cam Davis.
Yeah, but you already said you don't care about driving distance.
Yeah, I know. I know, but Cam Davis, you watch him, he's long. He's not one of those guys that it's like chicanery driving distance.
Right. That makes sense. Well, yeah. I love that.
It's a heart play.
What's that?
It's a heart play. I love the kid. I think.
Well, we all have those heart guys.
Yeah.
I've been on Zalatoris all year. I've been on. These guys know my love affair with Hovland, Scheffler, and Zalatoris. And I got a little Corey Connors love in there. You can tell that. But anyway, well, man, once again, Andy, this has been amazing. I love PGA. I love Major Week. I know this is one of the busiest times of the year for you. This is a first-time show. We're going to evaluate and talk about doing this more often. especially for 100% all the majors and wherever else we can go. You also like you also like talking football, don't you?
I do. I love talking football. I actually, in my most latest podcast, we got into it. We got into talking football at the end with my guests. I'm so excited for football season. I don't know how I'm gonna fit it in because I didn't expect the golf show to take off the way that it has. So I don't want to throw everyone off by throwing football in the mix and kind of becoming this football guy too. But football has always been part of the plan for me. I am a huge football guy. I've already been kind of diving into the season win totals already. Those just came out. So anytime you need someone to talk football, I'm happy to do it.
Well, you know what? Let's get through the PGA and we may have a really cool, way too early prediction show for football for the
That'd be
2021
fun.
season. I think that would be a lot of fun.
I've already got some takes.
All right. Well, this is going to be awesome. We're going to do that probably in the next couple of weeks. So we're going to have you on for that. His name's Andy Lack. Andy, how do you get found on Twitter?
It's ADP Lack Sports on Twitter. So yeah, please give me a follow on Twitter. I post all of my picks there, all the links to my podcast and stuff like that. I tweet out a bunch of cool stats over the week. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I answer DMs. If you guys have betting questions or stuff like that, I'll actually answer you and happy to engage in any dialogue. So yeah, shoot me a follow on Twitter at ADP Lack Sports.
That's awesome, Andy. And how lucky am I that I get to have you on Monday night, and then tomorrow night I get Pro Justin and Guru Nick going over there modeling all the DFS plays and fades and optimal lineup stuff. And so, what a great 1-2 punch having the stats and analysis, betting show on a Monday and then the DFS show on a Tuesday, and then hell, we're gonna throw a Thursday night show in there just to talk about the first round. And so I love this time of year. I love what we're doing, and I love the fact that you came on and shared so much with our audience. Once again, to the audience, give Andy a shout out, give him a thumbs up, give him a comment, and don't forget to comment on who you picked to win. Because if that player wins, you win an autographed photo of that player, and we would love to send that out to you. And once again, thank you for being part of what we do. We appreciate it. It helps us. It motivates us. It encourages us. And that being said, peace out, everybody. Be looking for us tomorrow night at 9:00, and we'll see you then. Peace out.
Did you get all that? If not, make sure you head over to HammerCast.com, subscribe, and join the Hammer Nation. Until next time, keep grinding.